Hi everyone, welcome to the first video on my YouTube channel where I'm going to be talking about Matt Walsh's documentary, What is a Woman? First of all, let me introduce myself. My name's Raminder. I am a former lawyer here from Vancouver, BC. I switched careers to be a spiritual healer. And, I used to have a YouTube channel and I started my YouTube channel again. I'll get into what happened with that in a later video, so you don't think I'm a little bit of a kook, but those of you that already know me know what I'm about and why my YouTube account from before is no longer here. But overall, I want to talk about this documentary in this video. My channel overall will be geared towards my thoughts on certain things, controversial topics, what's going on in government and policy and law, given my background in law, and overall with just demographics and spirituality and stuff. Given I am a spiritual healer, I like to talk about the design of things, and I will talk about that a little bit in this video, not so much as I will be in future videos. So I should start off by saying I do have a bachelor's of arts in sociology, and gender studies was not the same as what it is now. When I saw that this documentary came out, let me preface by saying that this documentary is about defining what a woman is. A lot of us know that the radical left has started to really make a scene over gender politics and ideology. I am personally somebody that I would say falls in the middle of this. I understand and I resonate with respecting pronouns, respecting gender and sexual choice, if any. And why I say if any is because there are some people that don't like to define themselves with labels. And many will disagree with that when it comes to biology, for example. So your sexual reproductive organs, your penis and your vulva. And so I see it from the middle because of that education. Whoa. And what I've just learned, right? And I like to give my thoughts, and sometimes people agree, sometimes people don't, but I think it's important to come on here and just speak about it. So Matt Walsh, author, blogger, TV icon, from what I know. I didn't really know who he was before this documentary. He made a 1.5-hour documentary about what is a woman, asking different scientists and social scientists and doctors and general members of the public what the definition of a woman is. And so, like I said, the radical left, let's say, or the Democrats, some of the liberals here in Canada, have started to make a mockery out of gender identity, in my opinion, and in others' opinions too. There are things that I definitely agree with. Something I don't agree with is how every Tom, Dick, and Harry company has started to make LGBT products in the month of June to celebrate Pride Month. Like, those are things that grind my gears, let's say, because of the amount of work that's actually done to have an inclusive and equitable workplace. So I'll talk a lot about that in these videos as well. But overall, I was surprised that I didn't roll my eyes at the documentary. It was really neutral. I felt like he talked to people from various different sides to get various perspectives. And at the end of the day, he was just curious of what is the definition of a woman? If we can define so many other things in the world, why is it that we can't define a woman? So I want to talk about this a little bit on the spiritual side. I don't want to get really into it, but in my belief system, the more I attune myself with the higher dimension, or the more I attune myself with, energy, I see, gender we know is a construct in the sense that people are confined by certain binaries. And what that means is, if you're a male, you like sports and you like cars and you wear blue. If you're a female, you like the color pink, you wear frilly dresses and you play with dolls. Those are gender binaries. And overall, people are stuck into the conditioning of those things from a very young age. And that's not something that I agree with. I'm not someone that really cares for gender reveal parties. I think that, I don't want to say subjecting your child to that, but celebrating what their genitalia is, for example, is not necessarily how they're going to identify, and that what they're going to get in that sort of scenario or at a baby shower may not be what they grow to like, but they are then from even before they're out of the womb, told that these are the things that they need to do, things they need to wear. And so I do find that there's a fine line there, especially as somebody that grew up kind of as a tomboy. It's not that I didn't have access to those things. I grew up in a household with 3 boys. But overall, it's the resources, the access, and the ability that these children have to make their own decisions. And so that all comes down to parenting, right? That doesn't really come down to what these parties entail and stuff. It's how do your parents treat you in a household and what kind of upbringing do you have? And so overall, when I look at it from a higher dimensional perspective, like when I zoom out, which we can all do, it's people are really confined, and that's why they say that gender is constructed. It's the roles, it's the gender pay gap, it's the socioeconomics of it, right? And the resources and the access to things that's different. And people will say, well, there's, women have equal rights and things like that. But the patriarchy is just collapsing at this specific moment for the next decade or so, where we're going to be seeing the matriarchal energy come up into play a little bit more. And I'm going to start talking about that a little bit later in this video. But overall, the energy collapse right now is something that we are intentionally seeing to shatter Earth. And so when I say that there's fluidity, right, people don't even like to talk about gender fluidity, but there really is, because at the end of the day, we're all energy. We are physical conduits of specific energy, but we all have masculine and feminine energy. And the goal to be really balanced in life is to have a balance of that feminine and masculine energy. It's not to be really overly dominant, where you would be machismo, or overly suppressed, where you may be in your distorted feminine energy, right? And so it's very important to, I think, understand that everybody has certain traits in their life, and as human individuals, we are hosts of specific energy. And that's something that you're going to hear me talk a lot about on this channel. And a part of my purpose on Earth, or as a spiritual being, is to teach this info, or this human design sort of aspect, to everybody, to understand how they can have a life of more balance and more fulfillment. And so at the end of the day, what people are seeking, let's say you're LGBTQ2SI+, or I'm not sure what the acronym is at this moment, a technical acronym, so I don't mean to offend anybody. What people are seeking is home. What people are seeking is belonging. And what these movements have done is given the exact opposite of that. Whether that's through ignorance, whether that's through lack of education, whether that's people on the outside talking about them, right? You may have heard before, don't talk about us without us, right? That sort of a vibe. It's what are people actually seeking at the end of the day? And that is resonance. That is community. And the thing is when you really get away from community is when you start to do things that may seem very irrational to others that are not living your experience. And so I think empathy is really important in these scenarios, to understand why certain people may make certain decisions, or may, let's say, introduce a new category of gender or sexuality in order to feel that they have a place to go, right? So at the end of the day, on a higher, like on a deeper level, that's how I see it. And the way that it comes out in the 3D is being manipulated and misunderstood, and is being used by the public and for the public as a way to create more of a divide. And so the goal in creating these communities was to have inclusivity, but it has achieved the exact opposite. And whether or not Matt Walsh understands that is beyond me. I do feel like he has a sense of genuine curiosity when he goes around and asks people what their thoughts are, but I think that at the end of the day there is a level of ignorance as to why this is happening. But overall, we know that we all come out with a certain genitalia. I think that's science, and I think that that's fact, right? So I do agree with that. So they talk a little bit about the difference between gender and sexuality. So gender, like I said, is something that's you can conform by, whereas sexuality is your biology, right? So somebody that is gay has a penis, but they are attracted to somebody of the same gender, right? That may play similar gender roles within society, or may not. So it kind of just depends, right? When it comes to lesbians, you have the same sort of scenario, except sometimes one of the partners may have more masculine dominant energy, which society has labeled butch, right? I don't really use that word, but would have that sort of energy. And that's normal, right? I think that when Matt Walsh used the word "what is truth," and one of the people in the video has said that that's condescending and rude. I really did agree with that, because truth is subjective to the individual person. You can't ask about what truth is without understanding that person individually. So yeah, there can be facts that are true, right? But what is somebody's truth and experience is not an answer that I could answer for you, somebody that's watching this video. I don't know what your truth is. I may know what your experiences are if you're a client of mine or you have been, but overall I did believe that it was rude and condescending to say what is the truth, because that is something that people live their whole life to seek out in their own spirituality and their own spiritual journey. And many have reincarnated to come back onto this planet to learn what their truth is, to be educated in a different way, to have different experiences, to balance out karma and what have you in a way that they haven't been able to do before. And so I think it's really important to understand and really respect that every individual has, again, their own experience. And unfortunately, when people become suppressed, it can also turn into violence. And we did see that a little bit in the documentary where they talked about trans violence and how that has played out, and trigger warning and molestation and sexual assault and things like that. So it's never okay to lash out in that way. It's about what caused a person to do that. We're not justifying actions. We're asking on the root level, how has somebody being misunderstood or shunned or not given the right resources lead them to make these sort of decisions, right? And so the radical left is continuing to push certain narrative and ideology. How is that programming children? I think that that's the main concern. And Matt Walsh did write a book that has now been, I think, removed from Amazon about I'm a Walrus or something like that. And I really did roll my eyes at that part of the documentary, because I think trying to counteract what's already being done by writing a book opposite on the extreme other side was not the right way. I think that's harmful for children just as much as maybe being programmed a certain way is harmful for them. I think that removing that book was right, and I don't believe that it was an acceptable. Everybody has their own truth and their own rights, right? But let's just say that's not a book that I would ever recommend, promote, or gift to anybody. He was comparing women to chickens laying eggs, and what the pediatrician had said was, do chickens have emotions? Are they conditioned? And I definitely agree with that. Like I said, we are raised in specific environments that play into our life experience, right? To compare humans to chickens is not comparable because of the amount of life we live, number one, and number two, the way in which we are programmed from a young age, like I was saying. So to say, this chicken laid an egg or whatever, and that means it's a female, so this person came out with a vulva and a vagina, that means that this is a female. Yeah, okay, sure, right? But what are all the things that come into play after that? And that's really what human design is. Human design is learning how you have been conditioned based on your soul's blueprint. And you spend your whole life getting to the point where you are conscious of what used to be subconscious. So what that means is what's been suppressed for so long starts to come up to the surface later on, and you realize what your childhood trauma and conditioning is. And so if you wish to, you start to work through it. And a lot of people go through their awakening that way. And so comparing a human being to a chicken, we don't know if chickens go through awakenings or if chickens have these environments, or if mama chicken and daddy chicken talk to baby chicken about what their gender roles and norms are, or what they ought to do in the household. I think that's, I don't want to say that that's a privileged view, or whether or not white privilege plays into that, and privilege expands way beyond skin color. It goes to education, finances, where you live, your education, etc. Right? It's not just your skin color, but there was a place, or there was a part of the documentary where he went to Nairobi and starts talking to people there, and they're just like man, woman, nothing in between, right? And so again, in those sort of scenarios, it's asking yourself, where do you live? What are these people's roles, right? And that role, or sorry, in that sort of environment, the hunter-gatherer sort of dynamic was still very much alive, or is still very much alive. That is the predominant sort of energy and balance of energy in a lot of places on the planet, right? I think he did want to give that different perspective of somewhere, which is obviously why he went. But it's, what are we learning in these moments, right? Where are we going? Who are these people? How are they conditioned or not? What do they have access to again, right? Like, I remember going to university with somebody, and she had never been out of the Middle East before. And she came from a country that, like, liquor is forbidden for women. And I don't know if liquor stores were forbidden, but I don't think she had ever drank. And then it was just like, the life you start to live after being suppressed for so long is a lot different than it would have been had you not had that suppression in the first place. And so why I bring this up is because that is normal. That's normal for that country. You would not see that happen in Canada unless you're in a specific household, or in a culture or a religion, and in a family that continues to perpetuate that sort of mentality, right? And so I feel like, even though the question of what is a woman is, yeah, I think it's a valid question. It's about, what are people going through on a daily basis? This is a much bigger problem than the definition of that. I think it's eye-opening for a lot of people to start asking these questions, but it's about, how do you use this knowledge? What are the tools and the resources that you can actually give to the public in this specific day and age? And, people sometimes find truth and resonance in labels, like I was saying. The goal is to not have to label or identify yourself at all. That is high dimension. Right? The goal is to be okay in your own energy. But sometimes you got to reincarnate a dozen times maybe to have that perspective. And so it's who's here on this planet at a specific amount of time, and what are they meant to learn in this specific scenario or during the specific lifetime. And you're going to take that knowledge on, because it's energy, when you reincarnate and come into a physical body again. And so I would say something like, that's truth, because you're going to come back. Right? And you can continue to come back until that clicks in you, that there is higher dimension, right? So someone watching this, you may be watching this and being like, that's not true. There's no higher dimension. What the hell is that? The earth is flat, And I respect that choice and belief. I respect that, because how I see that, I guess, on my end, how I rationalize that is that there are many lives to go, and you're in the early set of your life or your lives that are yet to come. And I think that that's really cool, because you get to learn so many cool things along your journey. A little bit about gender roles. Like I said, about culture, a couple of examples are, in Hispanic culture, a lot of families take the maiden name. Right? So that's an example of something that's not as common in Western culture. In Indigenous culture, the matriarchy is gold. Indigenous individuals also believe in two-spirited, which is more about fluidity, which is more about your masculine, feminine energy and balance in that. Right? And so it's about, what is the mainstream? How has colonialism and white supremacy really dug in the mainstream narrative to be, this is what is the norm, right? So the overarching issue is much bigger than what is the definition. What do we go by? Because this is centuries of programming through the education system, the legal system, the medical system, the political system. What is it built on? You can have as many equity and inclusion initiatives as you want, but the prime structure, it's rebuilding a house on bad bones. You can keep rebuilding, you can keep rebuilding, you can keep rebuilding, but the foundation is cracked. The foundation is cracked. there's been mold in the insulation and you just took the insulation out and replaced it, except the wood is chipping, right? It's becoming damp. It just doesn't function the same way. So just think about society as having bad bones. And we just keep putting things on top of the bones, thinking like, it's going to get better, it's going to get better. Let's just replace the drywall. Let's just repaint it. Let's just strip it and do it again. And it's like, no, we need a complete reset. We shouldn't even be living in this environment. We shouldn't be in this community. We need to move and start again. And so we really are in the process of doing that at this particular moment. Oh, they started talking about Kinsey, who was a scientist, saying children are sexual from birth, and he got a lot of backlash. That's something that, okay, I'm not saying I agree with Kinsey. I do agree that children are sexual from birth. I do believe that. I have seen that. I have kind of experienced it as well in on my own. I think that we all have in various ways, whether it's very mild or, I know they're talking about mental illness and stuff, but, children are taught to believe that sexuality is a sin, right? We are born primal beings. That is who we are, right? It's a part of our energy. And so children are sexual from a young age, but it's being mindful in how you teach it, of course. It's not showing them graphic books and having obscene conversation in the classroom. It's about teaching them the proper things that they need to know at specific ages. That even goes down to menstruation and periods, sexual birth control. So what are the appropriate ages to do that? Of course, it's not in, let's say, elementary school or when someone is under the age of 12, I would say. But people start going through puberty, especially girls, at age 10, 11, 12 now. And what does that do? That amps up your hormones, your sexual response, gives you the ability to get pregnant. So to then not know what the functioning of your body is, I think that's very dangerous. And he did cover in a part of the documentary a book that's written, and the doctor there, psychiatrist, I think it was saying, can you believe 10 plus? But like I said, some girls are going through puberty at that age. So I think it's just assessing how the appropriate education should take place. And that's not why I'm here on this video. Talking about chemical castration. Yeah, I think that is very problematic. Misgendering and the harm that it could cause. I do believe in the harm of misgendering. I have heard of lawyers, for example, that have felt harm from or been harmed from being misgendered. Now in British Columbia, we have a rule where you introduce yourself to the court with your pronouns because of the misgendering that was happening with predominantly gays and lesbians within the legal community. And so I think that is something important to keep in mind, and understanding why pronouns exist and having a level of awareness around it without looking at it as an I rule is super important to have an inclusive environment. And so, I know it's hard for individuals to make certain changes like that, but again, I think it's toeing the line of, how many do we create and what's sustainable for a community to understand on a broad level, when it's not like one person or one community is more important than the other, but how do we keep up to date with what's going on and remain educated in this space? I think that's a really important question. And then going to say, well, people don't know, it's how are people learning? Where are they being educated? And again, this goes down to the bare bones and the surface level of what are the conversations that are happening. Animal identification and queer identity. So there was an individual that was talking about having a connection to wolf spirit. The thing is that's another part of the seeking community space. I can feel very drawn to animals as a spiritual being. I mean, I'm not saying I am an animal, right? Or that is my family. But I think, again, it's showing compassion for those individuals that are going through, at times, an identity crisis and wanting to find themselves. I think it's important to bring it down to why that's occurring and why that's happening. And if it doesn't harm you, why do you why is it such a big topic of conversation to talk about somebody around you all of the time, right? There was this scenario where they're talking about, you know, a child wanting to be referred to as, I think, a wolf or something like that, or a cat in the classroom. I think that that is, you know, of course, a bigger conversation. But even when it comes to seeking help or social help, mental help, or whatever it is, whether it's just like talking to a counselor, I don't mean mental illness per se, it's who is talking to them. And I think that that has become the big issue, is who is talking to them. Who are the people in the schools? Who are the people they are being referred to? And do they fall on a radical side, right? So it's like not jumping just to allow somebody to do a surgery right away, or saying, you know, this is my truth, right? It's allowing the kids to still go and play imagination and play whatever, and finding their truth. I think that confining to gender norms is something that has led, that continues to perpetuate the patriarchy that we're in. I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are. If you're not following my socials already, they'll be linked in the description. My Instagram, my Spotify, my TikTok, and all of that. If you want to book a reading with me, a human design reading, that will also be linked in my bio. So yeah, I'll catch you guys in another video. Bye.